Hello folks, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. And in this episode we're going to continue to work on the rear axle of old Rusty. In the previous episode we have taken the rear axle completely apart, and this is now the empty rear axle. We have removed the differential, we removed the drive shafts and so on. So in this episode we're going to clean up this housing, we will shot blast it, and we're going to repaint it. We also removed the leaf springs, and those will be taken apart completely, cleaned up, repainted and then reinstalled. And of course the work would not be complete without checking out the differential, cleaning it all up and then making sure that all the tolerances are in place, and then have it reinstalled. So the first step is to degrease the housing of the rear axle, and for that one I'm using a degreaser, Jizzer in this case. I'm not making a commercial for that, but this is a pretty good product, and I know there are many other products. So I placed it in a little spray can. There we go. So let me just get it all soaking wet with the degreaser. I already sprayed on it before, so I have let it sit here for about 2 hours or so, and now we can get it cleaned with a high pressure cleaner. So most of the nasty stuff I'm trying to get off with this scraper. Now the seal that I had on here, this is the side where the diff was connected. That seal I can't get anymore, so I will have to create my own seal or gasket. So that's another thing we'll have to do in this video. There's always a lot of cleaning that needs to be done. Even though I'm going to shot blast it, the problem is with shot blasting, it's not very good on grease. On this side, typically the wheel hub connects, and the half shaft is coming through from the diff in the far end through this opening here. Now you might notice that we don't really have a modern seal on this. This is a old-fashioned seal consisting of a disc of wilt. And this is the disc of wilt. In fact, we got 2 of them in there. I already had it primed open so I could show you that. So these are the kind of things you certainly want to replace. Now the welt will absorb oil, and it will expand and seal off the half shaft which is coming through here. Maybe not 100%, but then again on the wheel hub itself there is going to be another thick fat grease kind of filter, let's say, or stop to avoid oil coming from the diff through the opening here onto the brake shoes. So I will have to find out if I can get a new seal for this, a modern one with rubber, or if I can find new welt discs like this to have that installed. Now I know I can buy a welt, and I could always place it in such a way that where it connects is at the upper side, but that would be messing around a little bit. So I'm gonna put those back for now and try to find if I can find these parts on the internet. You never know. Sometimes the world is full of surprises. This is the differential of the U23, and it's a very typical one for that period. It's what we called a open beveled geared differential. It's very simple. Right there in the back you will see the pinion, and the pinion is been driven by the drive shaft, which is coming from the gearbox. And when the pinion is spinning, it's going to rotate the ring gear, which is this big ring right here. And you can see that the teeth are not straight, and this is just to create more surface. But what is important is that we can actually check the wear and tear patterns on those teeth. So if I rotate the pinion, you can actually see that the ring gear is following along. And of course there is a ratio between the pinion and the ring gear. But looking on the ring gear, that looks pretty much intact. All these teeth are in a very good condition. So I don't think I need to take this differential completely apart. But of course that's only one part. And on the ring gear, there's a shaft connected, and that shaft rotates along with the ring gear. Now on that shaft, there is what we call a spider gear. That's the gear right there inside. I'm not sure if you can see it rotating. You see that, how that rotates? That's the spider gear. So the spider gear can rotate on itself along this axis, but this axle is fixed to the ring gear. A little bit about the operation, and then we will do some measurements. So the half shaft is coming in on this side, right here through this opening, and it locks with its spline into what we call the shaft gear, which is sitting inside here. And the shaft gear is connected in a 90-degree angle with the spider gear. And the spider gear is connected or rotates around an axle which is tied towards the ring gear, right? So when we are driving the car in a straight line and both wheels have the same amount of grip, then the torque applied coming from the gearbox to the main drive shaft will rotate the pinion in the back. The pinion will cause the ring gear to rotate, and when the ring gear rotates, that takes along the spider gear, and the spider gear is then connected to the shaft gear, and the shaft gear is interlocked with the half shaft. So if both wheels are having the same grip on a straight line, then the spider gear nor the shaft gear will rotate. They will be fixed and locked in. But as soon as one of the wheels is losing grip, you will see that the spider gear will start to rotate on its own axle together with the shaft gear. So that way we don't get any torque on that wheel. So that's a little bit of a drawback of these open bevel geared differentials. To make sure that you have the full grip, you can look on the wear and tear, and this looks okay on this diff. I don't need to change anything on that. But if it was not, then I would have to put some different spaces in between the bearings on the pinion to bring the pinion more forward or more backward so it would align properly with the teeth of the ring gear. So we're not going to do this. This looks all right. For the spider and shaft gears, which are inside, they have to be aligned, and the difference between the two and the 90-degree angle should be no more than 0.5 millimeters. So I have checked this out, and this is quite all right. It's hard to show you because you really need to get in there and start measuring that. So I'm not going to take this apart. There's a preload on the bearings, both on the pinion bearings, but also on the crown wheel bearings that we see here. So, but I'm not going to change that because the bearings, they look okay. I have not seen any weird parts. They don't make any funny noises, so we don't need to do that. But there is one thing we certainly want to check, and that is what we call backlash. And backlash is the play that you might have between the pinion teeth and the ring gear teeth. And you can see or hear it. We have a bit of play. So we're going to measure this. Now, you can adjust that by putting additional washers in, by raising or lowering the ring gear. It's a bit of work to do that, but right now I'm not going to do this because I think it's quite all right. But let's measure it anyway. So the way to measure the backlash is to use a micrometer or a dial or a gauge like this, and you point it on one of the teeth of the ring gear, and then you move it around and you'll measure how much play it has. So let me install this and then I'll show you how it's done. I have installed the gauge and the tip is sitting on one of the teeth. I'm going to zeroize that, and now I'm going to rotate slightly the ring gear until the point that we have a movement, or the beginning of a movement, but we shouldn't have the movement really, on the pinion. So let's do that. All right, that's it. So from 0 to about 40. So I have about 40 multiplied by 0.01 millimeter. 40, which is about a half a mil of play. So let's check it one more time. Yeah, that's about right. And I see a little bit of movement. All right, so this is about right. And you want to do this on a couple of those teeth, and then you know if your backlash is okay. Now, I think the backlash on this diff is all right. There's no oil on it for the moment, so that will reduce it a little bit. So I'm happy as long as it stays below 50. And right now we have like 36, 37. So really, that diff is in a good condition. All I'm going to do with this diff right now is actually clean it up with brake cleaner on the inside. No water at all, because that's not good for the bearings. And then when all this is cleaned up with brake cleaner, we're going to blow it dry with the compressed air, and then, you know, we basically could fit this guy back together. I will take the leaf springs apart and then clean every leaf, get it painted, and then put it back together. Now this is a bit loaded. I already have removed some of the bolts that were sitting here, so the spring is already in two parts. So let me take the top part off so you can actually see it. And these guys are, I mean, really heavy. There we go. This is the bolt you want to remove on both sides, and that allows you to split the leaf spring into two parts. It went pretty easy, but remember, it's going to be slightly loaded. So when you're removing this bolt, you have to be a little bit careful because of the load on the spring, it may jump out a little bit. It's not too bad. And I think assembling it back together might take a jack to really squeeze it together to get it done. So in essence, I have split the spring into two parts, the upper part and the lower part. And you can see the rust that we have on it. So they can really use a good cleaning. So now I'm going to take it further apart, leaf by leaf, and you see all the different leaves here. And I will also keep them in the right order, so I'm not just going to toss it all on one big pile. No, I want to have it in the proper sequence. You can see there's actually a groove inside, and on the other side you got an edge, so it really fits together. I'm not going to take both spring leaves apart. I'm going to leave one intact so I have a model. So when I reassemble the other one, I know exactly how to do it. Because if you take both apart, it happens that you start to forget how things were put together. And that is never a good thing. And there may be some tension on it, so I'm not going to keep my fingers on it. So I've been shot blasting each individual blade of the springs, and here you have the first pack. But of course there's about 6 more to come. So I'm going to do that, and after that we'll clean them up, degrease them, and we go in to paint it with some black paint, a very thin coat. And after that we'll apply some PTF grease on the blades themselves, and then we reassemble it. And these are the remaining 5 leaves that I still have to shot blast. And I'm using Garnet 360 for that, and an Ibex blaster, and you've seen that in previous videos. So let me get on with this, and then I'll show you what we have done with the housing of the rear axle, because that one has already been shot blasted. The rear axle has been shot blasted. All I need to do now is degrease it, and then we're going to paint it in shiny black. We also have the cover. That's the other thing we're going to paint in black. And then I have the springs laying around, or the spring leaves. They're laying on this table right here, and I'll show you that in a minute, and some on the floor, and those will also be painted in black. So these are some of the leaf springs. So I will have to paint it in two stages. One's on this side, and when it's dry, I paint the other side. This stuff, which are the big brackets, and they are really in a good condition, so I don't see any need to make any new ones. Even the thread is really, really good. So I'm going to powder coat those with black powder. Same thing for these metal blocks that go on the bottom. We also will powder coat those, and the other small brackets that we have here. Now this is the diff cover, and that also is going to be painted in black. So not all the surfaces will be painted on the rear axle. For instance, where the wheel flange connects to the rear axle, this surface here, that's going to stay bare metal, and therefore I'm just going to sand it a little bit extra. Although we have it shell blasted, it will benefit from another cleanup. But it's going to make the installation at the end a lot nicer. So all this is now nicely cleaned up, but we still have to remove a lot of the blasting grit or the Garnet 360, which we have inside. So therefore, we're going to blow this out with some compressed air. But at the end, actually, I took it outside and I have had it rinsed out fully because I don't want to have any of that grit inside. Now, I forgot to turn on the microphone on the camera. It happens sometimes, so this is a bit of a voiceover now. Now, the welding on these trumpets at the edges of the rear axle, that's a bit rough, and I don't know if this is afterwards or this was in the factory, but throughout the whole axle, I see this kind of welding. So this is the surface where either the differential connects to or the cover in the back of the differential. And of course, I don't want to paint that area because I want to keep that clean and smooth. So that's why I have been sanding this down a bit, and as you can see. So before I'm going to paint, I will tape all this off so we don't get paint on this surface. So now let's clean the thread. It's been around for a long time. I don't want to cross-thread it, so. But this goes very smooth. And here is an old bolt. And of course, we'll install new bolts once we put everything back together. Let's see. And that's just perfect. So I'm going to do the remaining holes, and then we do the other side. Creating a new gasket is very simple. I'm using gasket paper, which is fairly thick, this one, and I'm using the cover from the backside of the differential, but I know it's a little bit smaller, so I'm using a washer to extend the radius a bit. So all I need to do now is to run around with the washer, and then cut it out. That's how simple that is. It always works. Whoops. Here we go. So all I need to do now is cut it out, and then we place it on the diff, and then we trace it from the inside. So I traced around the edges of the diff, and now it's just a matter of cutting it out. So this will be the seal. This is the bolt that has to go through the gasket, and therefore I think I will be using this hollow punch. Yeah, that's about right. Centering the punch properly. And we got our hole. and I'm just gonna go on. So let's see how the seal fits, and I think this is a very good fit. So that is done. I still need to make a second one. A little bit of degreasing, and then we will be able to paint. So I'm done with restoring the rear axle, or at least the casing for that. I kept the surface where the gasket will come clean, so there's no paint on it. This is our gasket that we created. I'll show you the backside in a minute. So that way it will seal off very well. Of course, we're going to also install new bolts, and I know I don't have the washers on the locking rings, but that will be installed once we reassemble it. This is our second gasket, and as you can see, this is a pretty good fit. So whenever I'm going to install the diff on the car, then I'm going to put some grease or potentially some liquid seal around this gasket here. So now it's time to paint all the other little parts. I have them laid out on this board here. I also have some on the other side, but we also need to paint the springs, which are right in front of me. And to do so, I'm going to use a small paint gun. So this little paint gun is very handy for small surfaces. Of course, I could have used my SATA, which is a high quality paint gun. But to be honest, for spring leaves and bowls and whatever you have on small parts, there's no need to have a very smooth and perfect finish with the paint. So this one will do more than well, because it allows me to get in small areas, and it allows me to make a little bit of paint, because paint is always limited in lifetime. One side of the leaf springs is now painted. Once that is cured, I'm going to flip them over and we paint the other side. Also, the little brackets that are holding the leaf springs together are having a coat of black anti-rust paint, together with the blocks that are supporting the springs. And then we also painted the brackets that are holding everything together across the rear axle. So all this will still get a second coat, and then that should be done. Now initially I was planning to powder coat them, but I decided not to at the end, because that might actually chip off on those parts. This part is the connection between the leaf springs and the chassis, and I've put some big bolts in there. They don't belong there normally, but I just do it so the surface doesn't get covered with powder, because I'm going to powder coat this one, because that's the perfect part to get it powder coated. Now, if you haven't seen on how you do powder coating, then I recommend that you look on one of my videos where I explain everything about powder coating. So powder coating is very simple. We got the powder in this container here, which is going to lock on to the bottom part of this gun, and then basically you go into powder coat like this. So this is going on top of it. This nozzle here causes electrostatic electricity, and it's going to charge the particles of the powder so that they attract to the part that you're covering. And this is what you're going to need. You need a good ground, because that's not a fake plug, but it's a ground plug really. And you clip this on to the working piece, and also you need to clip this on to the gun. And that way you're going to have the powder sticking to the piece. I forgot actually to turn on the camera, so this is something from a previous video, but it's the same principle. So here I'm connecting the ground clip, and the ground clip is also connected to the ground of your mains power outlet. The two pins, the white pins that you see, that's not power at all. We only use the ground pin in this reel, and you need to have this to attract the particles onto the metal part. And here I'm just preparing the gun. I'm checking the pressure, because you have to paint with this very specific pressure. And now we can apply the powder. It's not very difficult. You just blow it on there gently and you can see how that starts to cover the surface. And of course, you can vary the coat in terms of thickness, but there is a limit to it, of course. And I'm just painting the back side. Now you notice that where the clip is, of course, we may have a thinner spot, but that's not a big deal. I typically remove it and then I spray a little bit in that area and that will work. Now, once the powder is on and you're happy with the coat, then it's time to move it into the oven, and hopefully your oven is already preheated. So this is how it works, and now you see me filling that little spot in. Typically that works with this type of a powder gun. So the oven is now running. It's at 178 degrees centigrade. It should become more. And there you have it. You can see the part is right there in the oven, and wherever we had the paper, you can see it's already starting to melt. Now for the big metal piece, it's going to take a little bit longer because that's quite a big piece. So we need to wait about 10 to 15 minutes and then it will be all set. Well, here you have the part and you can see it's all melted and shiny. I'm just going to let it cool down now. And then we take it out and then have a closer look. Now the oven that I'm using is an old oven from a kitchen, industrial kitchen. Sometimes you can pick this up for a very cheap price, but you can do this in any oven really. And here's our piece that we just got out of the oven, which we have powder coated. All right, and as you can see, this is looking quite neat. It's well covered all around. So yeah, I'm happy with this. So folks, we've come to the end of this video and I hope that you enjoyed it. We have achieved already quite a bit of work and we cleaned up many parts that are making up the rear axle. We kind of shot blasted the rear axle and painted it. We got the surface done, we made new gaskets, we got new bolts, we got new nuts. We checked out many different things and we even did some powder coating. In the next episode, we go into reassemble that spring leaf, and that's a pretty heavy job to do. That's why I want to make it separate. And we go into attach the diff to the rear axle because that is not on the table yet. Thank you for viewing and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye.